That's me. Welcome to the morning meeting, everyone. Special holiday edition. Happy holidays to all. Happy Thanksgiving, or whatever it is you're celebrating. We're so happy to have you here on our last episode of the holiday week. Again, I'm not sure what you're going to do tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., but you won't be doing it with us because we're off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I do have a show tonight. So if your appetite for two-way is not sated by this time we spend together this morning, you do have an opportunity at 6 p.m. Eastern time to join in once again. If you're watching on YouTube, amazing. Thank you for being part of it on YouTube. Too bad you haven't figured out yet how to get on two-way directly, but we're glad to have you. And we hope you appreciate the program as much as we appreciate you. Please, if you're on garbage in the chat, put it in somebody else's chat. We believe in peace, love, and understanding, and the presumption of grace for all, particularly around the holiday season, although not only. And if you're watching here on two-way, we're delighted to have you, and we'd love to have your participation. We want to hear what you're thankful for besides Sean and Dan. We want to know your questions for Sean and Dan. We want to know if you know anyone named Boris, except the cartoon character. Please raise your hand if you'd like to be part of the conversation, because we would love to have you. So here we go. Our last seasonal episode before Thanksgiving. Dan, you're in Florida now, but you're coming back to New York for Thanksgiving. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I am. And actually, I have jury duty in New York City tomorrow. So get excited. That's how I'll be spending my day before Thanksgiving.
You will be dismissed within 2 hours.
That's the hope.
All right.
You know, Dan, I got a little worried that you're getting too close to Mar-a-Lago. We had to pull you back.
Sean, Virginia, Rhode Island, or something else?
Virginia for Thanksgiving. Rhode Island, beautiful at Christmas. Nothing says amazing like Rhode Island in the brutal winter.
I did a TV appearance a little earlier today with former Senator Rick Santorum, and we were asked to name our favorite Thanksgiving food. He went first and said stuffing to change it up, even though stuffing is the only correct answer. I went with cranberry. Dan?
Pecan pie.
All right, I know that's not a real answer. Dan? Sean? Nuts don't belong in pie. Sean?
I think maybe got into the wine a little too early. I'm a turkey lover. I like it. I like to. I'm with the staple.
Do you put the skin to the side or you hog the skin?
Oh, dude, more skin the better.
I'm with you. I don't understand the alternative perspective. All right.
By the way, just everyone's clear, once the meal is done, holiday Christmas music may start officially. I don't want to see decorations. The music starts when the meal ends. That's just
you switch over from yacht rock to Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a channel for every season.
All right. Daybook. Joe Biden. Yesterday, Staten Island. Today, Nantucket Island, where he has spent every Thanksgiving but one for like 3 decades. Don't know for sure that he's staying in David Rubenstein's mansion, but probably. And the whole clan will be there, an annual Biden tradition. Donald Trump, no public schedule. J.D. Vance, no public schedule. Congress home for the holidays. Easily the most interesting schedule of the day belongs to Vice President Harris, who we discussed at some length here yesterday. Her public schedule has her going, departing San Francisco at 4:10 Eastern time to fly back to Washington. Earlier, she's got 2 conference calls. The first is scheduled for, according to News Nation, 2:45 Eastern time, okay? 2:45 Eastern time with their major donors. And then 3 o'clock Eastern time, the grassroots call with Tim Walz. So by the formal schedule, she's allowing a full 15 minutes. I don't know how to divide 15 minutes by 2 billion, but it's not very much per major donor. Dan, as someone who's worked in the world of finance, if you saw that schedule that she was due to talk to her major donors for 15 minutes, and again, it's all backed up against her flight. So she can be late for the first one, but then it's going to cut into the second one, or she can push back her wheels up time. But what do you think of 15 minutes on the official schedule for major donors in the $2 billion campaign?
If I were thinking of running for president and I was not named Kamala Harris, I'd be very excited at how offensive that is.
Okay. If she, well, let's do it this way. Raise your hand. This is for everybody, not just Dan and Sean. Raise your hand, not your electronic hand, your physical hand. If you think the vice president's going to take questions on either call, raise your hand. Let's see.
That's funny.
Let's see. I don't see anybody raising hands. I see some thumbs down. Oh, Michael Shaw jokingly raising his hand just because he likes to be provocative. All right. No questions, probably. Raise your hand if you think there's someone on this call who has the dial-ins for both calls. Someone who has the dial-in for both calls. You are correct. We'll see how many I'm on, particularly once the Harris folks find out I have the dial-ins for both calls. We'll see if they change the number.
You just told them.
Block me. I know. You know what? I have other things to do during the times of the call, so I probably
Can
can't
I have
dial
it?
in. So I was just flexing. All right. Here we go. As I said, if you want to raise your hand, if you're here on the two-way platform to get into the conversation, we'd love to have you. Please raise your hand. We'll get to you shortly. As always, tell us where you are. Michael Graham has raised his hand. He's in New Hampshire. You can tell us who you voted for or not. Some people have started to say to me, stop asking people who they voted for. So let's make it optional for today. You don't have to say. Some people put their voting choice in their parentheses in their screen name. If you want to say, you can, but tell us where you are and maybe your favorite Thanksgiving food, as long as it's not a pie made with nuts, which makes no sense. All right, the Trump tariffs. I was told the tariffs were going to happen later, that there was going to be discussions with world leaders to see if they could get things done without the tariffs. I was telling people that just yesterday, when all of a sudden up it pops, Truth Social, Donald Trump, tariffs on Canada and Mexico, day one, tariffs on China coming soon. Sean Spicer, what is up with this? I think I know, but I'd love to hear your theory of why is he announcing tariffs before he takes office?
Because this is two things. One is, this is what we talked about yesterday. He's filling the oxygen in the room. He's made almost all the personnel announcements. Now it's followed by the policy second. I think he wants to get these guys to take action so that he comes into office with a better situation.
Dan?
So I was wondering if the fact that Scott, all the stories yesterday morning were that the new Treasury Secretary was going to help, that the markets were taking off because he was going to be a moderating, calming voice to the president if there was a little shot fired across the bow of, you work for me, not the other way around.
Yeah. So I wrote this morning in my newsletter, Donald Trump doesn't love tariffs. He wants the American economy to boom. And I believe that although he's a lame duck, that the point of view he has now is he's going to be better at being president this time because he knows how to do it. He knows all these world leaders. He knows the levers and the buttons. And threatening these tariffs, you look at the reaction of the Canadians, basically said, our economy's dead if he does this.
Right.
The Mexicans, we can't possibly do this. The Chinese, let's all get along. They're not defiant because they can't be. America has Madonna. America has the world currency. America has the market. They have no choice but to play ball with Donald Trump. And he's just gonna put his boot on their necks and say, gimme, gimme, gimme. And he can tweet all he wants about the tariffs, truth all he wants about the tariffs, never has to do them. But he knows now where the leverage points are. He doesn't know all these world leaders, but he knows their countries. He knows their predecessors. He's going to meet them. And not one of them can stand in the way of Donald Trump without him threatening them.
Well, and that's the point. He will cripple their economies. China's economy is even a lot softer than it was when he left office. Without market access, these guys are going to have big problems. This is the same play, by the way, that he made when he reformed NAFTA into USMCA. And I think Trudeau at the time said, I'm not going to play ball. And he said, fine, I'll cut the deal with Mexico. And the next thing you know, he's talking to Obrador. Trudeau calls him and says, yeah, I want back in. The second that they realized that market access was at play, that they were willing to cut through all the bluster and make the deal.
Yeah, the only thing though is this is not a total one-way thing. Like the United States also cannot afford massive tariff. Like the last thing he wants to start is if inflation starts taking back off because he's playing a game of chicken with the Mexicans, Canadians, and Chinese. I mean, it's.
But they'll never let it get there. Scott Bessent will be in the Treasury war room looking at 90 screens about all the world markets. And the minute there's an issue, they'll take the foot off the thing.
Well, but you don't think the Chinese know the same thing? I mean, they also own half our debt. Like for all the macho-ness here, it is not a, black and white. We have all the leverage.
It's not black and white, but it's also not high risk. There's literally no risk. He can calibrate the thing. He can pull them on. He can put them back. He can take other steps. He can move a carrier.
Yeah, but watch the markets today. I don't think there is no risk. I mean, look, one of the things about when he did the tariffs last time was he bought off the whole Midwest by giving subsidies to farmers. He gave exemptions to companies. Like, I hear you. Biden didn't undo them. They didn't cause inflation last time. But I would just caution that this is not like we have everything and the rest of the world is sitting there.
We don't have everything, but we have more than anybody else.
Let me go back to what I said. You got to remember the beauty of what he's doing right now is he's playing this out before he becomes president, right? And what he's asking for isn't an economic change. It's a securing the border issue because he wants the fentanyl kept out of the country, right? So the beauty of what he's doing now is if there's any market ramifications, it's on Biden's watch. It's actually a beautiful play. I mean, you got to give credit for that.
We as I joke, we only have one president at a time, and currently the president seems to be Donald Trump. Look, the implications of this are, yes, they're happening on Biden's watch, but all Donald Trump wants is his core things done. He wants booming economy. He wants close the border, stop fentanyl, etc. He doesn't have to buy off constituencies anymore because he isn't facing the voters again. So he doesn't have to buy off farmers, the midterms, whatever. It's not the same thing. I believe that the asymmetries, that the benefit the United States, diplomatic, military, economic, he's really more aware of those asymmetries than he was 8 years ago. And this is what this is about. It's to say to them well in advance, we're playing by my rules. It may not work, Dan, you're right. He doesn't have all the cards, but he knows what cards he has and he knows how to play them.
Yeah.
All right. All right. I'll point out we still don't know who the head of the NEC is going to be. I'll point out we still don't know what can go in reconciliation. I'll point out we still don't know if he can get 7 votes for anything from Senate Democrats.
By the
Those
way,
variables are big.
On the reconciliation point, the one thing that's going to be really interesting, and this is so in the weeds, but it's just a bullet point for everyone to understand, is how the Senate parliamentarian specifically rules is going to be critical. And if you go back to, I mean, this is to Bob Dole's days, there was a parliamentarian by the name of Dove, and they fired them when they didn't rule in favor of what could be in and out of certain things. So how the parliamentarian rules on what can be considered in reconciliation is going to be a huge ball game. On
permitting, on immigration related issues, it's huge. We also don't know what John Thune's attitude is going to be. Is John Thune going to be a Trump guy or is he going to be a Senate guy? We do not know. All right. Boris Epshteyn. Is it Epstein or Epstein? I just call him Boris. Epshteyn. Boris Epshteyn, for those of you who read the newspapers, what I call newspapers, you call links from X's. The transition did a report suggesting that he has been accused of asking people who wanted jobs or influence with the transition and the administration for very hefty retainers. The report was written by the person who was the de facto general counsel of the campaign and the transition. The report contained lots of allegations against him, which he has denied. Donald Trump did an interview with John Solomon about the report and about the accusations. Eric Trump spoke about them. Eric Trump, who is Boris's entree to Trump world, because they're friends from college. He spoke about it on Fox. It would seem, and it's been reported that Boris has clashed with many people in transition, including Elon Musk. It would seem that Boris is on the outs and maybe on the way out. But according to a senior official, I'll say official with the Trump team, Boris has not sought nor will ever seek a job in the White House or in the administration, and that he is still on good terms with the president, and that they spoke yesterday effusively about the Jack Smith developments. So, Sean, I go to you again first because you know a bit more about Trump world than Dan does. Is this just typical Trump world psychodrama and everybody has sharp elbows and, you know, everybody moves on together? Or is this represent some sort of change in Boris's status?
Well, I don't think there's any change in Boris's status that I've heard of yet. And I think what you saw, I thought the big tell to me was Eric Trump last night, who you mentioned. They went to Georgetown together. That's how I actually met Boris the first time is as he introduced himself as a friend of Eric's. And so when Eric came out and said, if this is true, they're going to be gone, that spoke volumes to me. Trump hates open grifting, right? You saw this with Dave Bossie in the past where he was raising money on Trump's back. And there's a big difference on how it's done. Everybody goes out there. I mean, Washington, D.C. is full of people who suddenly are close to Donald Trump or his orbit, who've never met the guy. But I will say that Boris has been a unique person in Trump world. He has a great relationship with Mrs. Trump. He is obviously, as I mentioned, close to the family. He has been a stalwart defender of Donald Trump through thick and thin. He was on the campaign in 2016. He came into the White House, worked for me. He went on the outside and worked for Sinclair. He has never wavered in his support for Trump, and Trump recognizes that. So Boris has a little bit of a longer leash than some, because he has been by Donald Trump's side through thick and thin, kept a rather low profile. And look, I get it. Welcome to Washington. People are trying to make money off their proximity to power. I think that the key difference, and this is where like the nuance matters, is everybody is a consultant and will tell you what to do. Is there a direct quid pro quo? And when a guy like Scott Bassett is saying, I was propositioned, and there's some others that are in a similar situation, if they go back to the campaign now that they've secured their position and say, yes, this is the deal. And to your point, if Musk is saying, hey, this isn't how this should operate, this is where, I always say in Trump world, you start with $1 and it just keeps going down. The question is how soon before you run out of money. I think because of Boris's steadfast commitment to defending Donald Trump, he's probably got a little bit of a longer leash, as I mentioned. But if more allegations come out and people were to go on the record, that's going to make it a lot more difficult. The difference is, I would say, whether it's Corey Lewandowski or Dave Bossie or a couple others, you normally get sent for a timeout. Boris, again, this isn't just he might be making money. Who knows what's true and what's not. But I think he is remembered by the family as someone that has been very, very loyal.
Dan, anything you want to say about this?
I think what Sean said about the nuance is right. There are tons of lobbyists around who will say, I'm close to this advisor or that advisor or a member of the Trump family. But there's a huge difference if you are literally pulling people aside after they're interviewed and saying, you need to pay me to stay in the race for a job. That is a different level. And look, if you're the Trump world, corruption and allegations of corruption swirled around you the first time. I just can't imagine that you want more of these stories. I mean, on some level, you shrug and just, it's like the Star Wars bar that there's always happening, but you don't want this type of stuff out there.
Yeah. So, as I said, Boris has denied these accusations. And as Sean said, this stuff happens. There is a difference. If the accusations were true, he's in the room. He's not just somebody like on the sidelines. He's in the room making decisions. I will say that I don't know how long Elon Musk is going to be in Donald Trump's orbit, but I bet Boris is in his orbit longer than Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I'll also say that because we dealt with two of the least leaking campaigns of all time, and really three, Biden, Harris, and Trump, very little is known about some of the most important events that occurred during this campaign. On the Trump side, Susie Wiles, amongst the many things she did, was manage a process where her candidate had to go to court, had to deal with the bandwidth issues related to travel and time and everything else, and organize the legal team. Because the legal team, if you've ever dealt with lawyers in a political situation, the lawyers just care about the law. Their job is to keep their client out of prison, right? The political people sometimes have other interests, and the way that she and Boris managed those two competing interests is something that contributed mightily to Donald Trump winning the nomination and winning the general election. And Donald Trump is well aware of that. He dealt with a bunch of lawyers who had varying degrees of political savvy, and the person who was often at the table and in the meetings and coordinating it was Boris, who has both political savvy and legal understanding. And that made a huge difference. And Donald Trump is, I believe from my sources, is well aware of that. Well aware. Now, as things developed yesterday, his liberty was not dependent on whether Jack Smith got convictions or not. But for a very long period of time, the question of his liberty related to, could he run for president and win the nomination and win the general election and continue to stall on the legal cases? And he did. And again, lots of people contributed to that, both on the campaign and in the legal team. The person who is at the fulcrum of that is the person now who faces these accusations. As Sean said, if they're public, if people want to take him down by going on the record rather than in this report, that could make a difference. But as I said, I don't think he's going to leave Trump world over this, but maybe he'll have a bossy-like timeout. All right. Last topic for us, unless something spontaneously comes up, like I've got a Thanksgiving surprise for everybody. James Carville and others are pointing out something we've discussed here, which is that the Democrats have a problem very similar to what happened in the 90s with talk radio, where talk radio rose up in part because of technology, but in part because the liberal media gave liberals a place to go. Conservatives flocked to talk radio, Rush and others, because it gave them a place to go that was friendly. Same thing happened with Drudge, etc. So now we saw in this cycle very, very popular talkers on the right with podcasts and with streaming shows. And people on the left are saying, oh, maybe we need that too. My friend Mitchell Jackson wrote an incredible piece on Substack yesterday about culture being upstream from politics and the fact that now conservatives, in part through conservative media, have found a way to take over some of the culture, enough of the culture to help Donald Trump win. So, Dan, how big a problem is this for Democrats? And if you were the person at the DNC charged with trying to fix it, is this a fixable problem? Because they tried to fix talk radio. They tried Air America. They tried liberal hosts, Ed Schultz, etc. They never found it. So is this a problem, and how fixable is it?
So I actually have a different take than James Carville and others. I think the problem is not that there's a lack of places to go. If you look at Apple and Spotify and different places, there are plenty of what I would call kind of progressive leaning podcasts and influencers that are out there. I think what the party had a problem with this last time around is a candidate problem. Joe Biden for 4 years did not engage really with anybody, partly because of loss of mental acuity, and partly because he was more obsessed with the New York Times editorial page than he was kind of anything else, even though, by the way, he wouldn't meet with the New York Times editorial page. Kamala Harris's problem was, right, one of defense, one of, I don't want to make a mistake. She didn't really think she needed to do it. By the time they kind of realized they had a problem in October, it was so kind of haphazard and frantic that it looked inauthentic, right? Going on Charlemagne the God and Call Your Daddy and these various podcasts looked desperate, and people didn't really buy it. I think the issue for Democrats is you've got to engage with these people on an ongoing basis. The person who first did this was not Donald Trump, but Bernie Sanders. And I think it's unbelievable that two of the oldest politicians, in Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, are kind of showing the light. But AOC and others are actually really good at engaging with these audiences. I just think the party has to say to itself, okay, we have to stop obsessing about what the Washington Post and New York Times and others think. And we have to, on an ongoing basis, engage with these different platforms, because it doesn't take a lot of effort to find out who they are and who their audience is.
Yeah, I actually agree with Dan totally. This is not a platform problem. You've got Pod Save America. You've got all these. I mean, this is like, again, this gets back to what we talked about yesterday. The idea of blaming everything but the candidate is mind-blowing. Like, she chose not to go on these platforms. She chose, I mean, for reasons that we discussed. I mean, not to just, it wasn't like she just didn't go on them. She couldn't go on them. She wasn't able to go on them in an effective way. But it's not like they don't exist. And that's sort of, again, if that's the takeaway, then man, you've got a bigger problem. It's misreading the problem over and over again between Politico and the story that they did, the Dan Ball story, and now the Carville takeaway. I mean, I get it. This goes back to, like, you guys, they might want to bring Dan back in.
Yeah, and I mean, I also just want to say, because we haven't really talked about it directly, but it got a lot of play at the end of last week. Like, the fact that some of these Senate candidates won, Democratic Senate candidates overperformed Kamala Harris. Now, they didn't win by a lot, but Harris didn't lose by a lot. The fact that several House candidates on the Democratic side overperformed the top of the ticket. Like, it's not a total 1980 wipeout where just like everybody across the board got taken down. Like, we have a problem. The trend lines are going against us and in Trump's direction. But, you know, I think the building blocks are there on our side to potentially get back in the game quickly. And conversely, there is a real outstanding question of whether this is a Trump phenomenon or a new GOP phenomenon. And I don't believe that's an answer question.
You know, it's a great question that you raised, because so many of these gains that we've seen on the Republican side with Black men, Hispanics, et cetera, I think there's a question: does that translate to the next Republican, or even in the midterms? Can candidates capitalize on this, or was this specifically because Trump brought him to the party? I think that's a great question that we have to ask ourselves, because I think there's a lot of Republicans that think that, you know, we get all this now, and that's not true. I think that there's an opportunity, but it's not necessarily. It's the same reason that there was issues with the red wave not happening in the midterms, because people want Trump. They don't want someone else.
And John Thune's not going to go on Joe Rogan next Wednesday to talk about reconciliation, right? It's got to be a unique thing. What you have to understand, most gubernatorial and Senate candidates do, is who are the influencers in your state? It's
Right.
not just the Des Moines Register Ed board, but like, who is that hot podcaster that's like really popular with the demographic that you're targeting? And don't just show up 2 weeks before the election and act like, you know, you've been a long time first time, right? Like, you've got to be engaged. The party has to be engaged. And I think the Democratic Party can do this.
Well, I think one of the smartest things JD Vance could do to consolidate his position, as you suggested, is to go on those shows regularly.
Yep.
He can do it. He can develop personal relationships with those people, and people in the media, contrary to popular perception, are human beings. And if the Vice President of the United States is stopping by your podcast every month and giving you time, you're going to be favorably disposed towards that person. And again, unlike Kamala Harris, I don't think there's a show in America JD Vance would turn down by saying, you know, I can't do it, or I'm worried about the reception I get. That's a huge advantage for him. And if you look at the other people who are talked about as potential presidential candidates in both parties, Governor Shapiro has been going on Fox News. He's pretty confident about going places. The others, you know, less so, and their performance level is just not that great. I hear all the time from people who aren't that into politics when they're talking about moments from the campaign that are resonant for them. For Donald Trump, it's positive moments going on different podcasts, particularly the alternative ones. And for Kamala Harris, it's going on The View and saying nothing comes to mind. All right, guys, anything else you want to say about that?
Nope.
Said it well.
All right, let's go to your questions, everyone. I'll save my surprise for a little bit. Oh, holy cow. All right. I'm doing something a little unorthodox here because I like to. Let's go to Germany and London.
In correspondence?
Our European team with the latest on tariffs, the tariff wars. Bill in Germany, Scott in London. Bill, who'd you support for president?
None of the above.
None of the above. And
yes.
Scott's a Trump man.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I lived in Seattle. Huh?
Yeah. Are you both expats?
Correct.
Correct. How are you celebrating Thanksgiving?
Well, actually, I am I just realized it because I knew you were going to ask this. He called on me. On Thursday, I'm actually going to the immigration office here in Bad Kreuznach, where I was born, and just having a chat there with the right people.
All right. Not sure what that means, but interesting.
Well, it might be an all-day process, so I'm not going to be eating turkey. Yeah.
Okay. So did you grow up in Germany?
Yeah. Well, sort of. We left when I was 3, but if I looked out my window, you could see the spot where I was born.
All right. But you're an American citizen.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
100%. All right. Scott, what are you doing for Thanksgiving?
We're going to enjoy it here in Boise, Idaho. Traditional turkey. I'm a big stuffing guy. So, and then some mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce.
So you're not in London?
No, I put that up there because I was an expat for 10 years. I lived also in Frankfurt and worked for a large financial institution, and I speak German. So I feel like global perspective is important.
Bill, do you speak German too?
Ein bisschen, yeah.
All right, you guys talk amongst yourself in German for a while.
That would be torture for him. Yeah, I don't want to do that to him.
All right.
Grüß Gott, Bill. Ich würde gerne mal auf Deutsch mit dir reden und manchmal werden wir Zeit haben.
And a good day, if you liked. Yeah. If you liked.
All right. Path breaking. Well, the AI will translate that later. Bill, what's on your mind?
Okay. Well, just curious. I guess I'll ask this now because raised my hand a few times and you never know when you're going to get called on. January 6th coming up. Again, maybe nothing will happen, but I think it's pretty remarkable that you do have January 6th, that day coming up, and this would have been a complete non-event. But you will have Vice President Harris, as President of the Senate, be counting the ballots. The whole process, that ceremony. Al Gore famously did, certified his own defeat in 2000. And I wonder if, do we think that there could be, something made of that? I mean, it would have been a non-issue before 2020, but we're in new territory here, and I think it's a pretty remarkable coincidence that you do have Kamala Harris of all people, making the official certification.
I'll go first. The Bidens have said they're going to the inauguration. I assume she will too. I think that from the point of view of the Democratic establishment, they're going to treat this like a normal inauguration. So I think you're right, it's a spectacle that she's doing it, but I think she's going to just do it as if, it was Mitt Romney or John McCain. Dan.
Yeah, I don't think no one believes this, on the Democratic side, to my knowledge, believes this election was stolen or that there were shenanigans or. So I don't think there'll be anything. I think it'll be a sad, day of remembrance for the country. I have no doubt we'll hear maybe a little different version from the other side, but I think business goes on and people get ready for Trump's inauguration.
Son.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't think so, but I don't put anything past a Maxine Waters or something on the House side. I mean, so who knows?
Yeah.
If there's stunts, but I don't think it's anything beyond political stunts.
Yeah. Scott.
Two questions relate to Russia. While I was at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that institution.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there in the late 1990s, and I negotiated the institution's largest financial transaction up until that date, and it was for a Russian oil company. The plan was to have covenants in the deal and bring Russia and the oil company closer to Western standards. Clearly, that failed. It was a high-profile transaction, so the Wall Street Journal asked me to write an editorial on that, and it was called "Send a Message on Lending to Russia." If you're interested, you can do a Google search. And then finally, as I mentioned before, I worked in Germany for the second largest financial institution, and I speak German. I also help build businesses in Western, Central, and Eastern Europe. So, Mark, you're famous for, and I love the show for this, the presumption of grace. So I ask that when I state my question, just keep in mind, in my view, that Russia has not been a serious threat to the United States since the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yes,
so
sir.
My two questions are, and I would call it an obsession, because Donald Trump did say in his first term he was just fighting for survival, as probably Sean knows. So who's benefited from this? You could call the media's, the Democrats, and the intelligence agencies' obsession with Russia. And who would benefit if that obsession continued in his second term?
So I'll ask for the same presumption of grace, because I'm gonna dovetail with what you suggested. I know a lot of really smart people about foreign policy who think that Bill Clinton's partnerships for peace and then NATO expansion by others subsequent has been a huge mistake and is what's caused Russia to feel encircled, and that it could have been handled very differently. Okay, I'm sympathetic to that point of view because I know a lot of really smart people who share your perspective on that, and I think it's true today. At the same time, I think it's fair to make the point that Putin has been a malevolent actor, both at home and abroad, that he has expansionist tendencies, that he's currently engaged, even if you think he was left with quote unquote no choice, he's engaged in a brutal war that's just decimated a country and killed a lot of his own people. So I don't think he can say, I think you can make the intellectual argument that the West should have done more to make Russia feel less threatened. But I don't think he can make the case that Putin has responded in a way to which he's entitled to any sympathy for how he's conducted himself. He's a brutal killer, and there were other ways he could have reacted to what may have been, from your point of view, and again, some very smart people I know in both parties, a failure to give Russia the breathing room to join. I think the biggest question now that goes unexamined is, if the war does end, how is Putin treated on the world stage, or subsequent Russian leaders, or the Russian foreign minister, whoever it is at the time? Are they invited to international events? Do the sanctions come off in any meaningful way? I think that's a really big question, because obviously long term, during the rest of Putin's reign and after, obviously it's in everybody's interest for Russia to be brought into the community of nations. But I don't know that that can happen as long as Putin's there, and I don't think it can happen until Russia gives a full accounting, moral, economic, military, financial accounting for the damage they've done, not just to Ukraine, but to all of Europe. And I think that's going to be vital. But you're right that many people believe that Putin was that Russian people were put in a tough position. Dan or Sean?
I think so. If your question is, who benefits? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, the more that we are fighting, the more that the defense industrial complex wins. The more that we pump out weapon systems and replenish stuff, the more that there is an activity happening around the world, a conflict, an incursion, they win. So that's the simple answer to that. The more money that we're pumping out to Ukraine, but the longer this goes, the more that they benefit from increased sales, transfers of weapons, et cetera.
I think the other thing, though, is even if you remove the external events under Putin, his domestic record of killing political opponents, it's now a joke when somebody falls out a window. I mean, it's like whether they're a business head or a government head, it happens so frequently that you're just like, yep, somebody else tripped. And the fact that he has remained in power, changed laws to maintain power, and some very smart people believe engages in external events to keep his country unified, to maintain power, is problematic. And you just, given their size, you have to always be concerned when you have an actor like that who has the nuclear weapons and a large military. And it just, he's done that himself. That is his own desire to remain in office.
Gentlemen, 3 quick questions for you. Number 1, Bill first. How did you learn about two-way?
You and I traded a few emails a few years back, and I guess it was on your contact list.
Right. Scott?
Mark and I found it on the X platform. If I may, just real quick follow-up points. I'm really glad you have that balanced viewpoint, Mark, because you don't hear that often in, let's say, call it the mainstream media. So I'm impressed, and Sean and Dan as well. And I think it's a subject you've talked about, series, something that the morning meeting with this great kind of long format could really help inform everyday Americans. So I'd love to participate in that, if that's something.
Okay, thank you. Yep, please come back regularly, including on that. All right, number 2, Bill, favorite Thanksgiving food?
Turkey, of course.
Okay, Scott?
It would have to be stuffing. I usually get 3 helpings of stuffing, so.
Yeah. All right. Now, guys, this question won't make sense at first blush, but it will soon. Before you came on camera today, did you shave? Bill?
Yes.
Yes. Scott?
I shaved yesterday morning. I wanted to look.
All right. You both look incredibly clean shaven, and you're about to find out why I asked that question. Thank you both for joining. Happy holidays to you. Very grateful. All right. So David Pluff has now done one of the first interviews a senior Harris campaign official has done, and it will come as zero surprise to any of you that he did it with the fellas from Pod Save America. The full interview will drop tomorrow, according to a post on X. But moments ago, they posted a soundbite from David Pluff, unshaven. Here it is.
It's always worth reminding people, it's really hard for Democrats to win battleground states. Let's look at Pennsylvania. 25% of the electorate is liberal, roughly. 34% is conservative. By the way, in most battleground states, that conservative number is over 40. So in every battleground state, there's more conservative than liberals. So in Pennsylvania, if X is to believe, Trump won conservatives 91.8, Harris won liberals 93.6. Moderates, Harris won 56.43, but you kind of got to win 60% of them, right? For Democrats to win battleground states, it is a false choice. You want to maximize your base, of course. And that was a place where we spent enormous time, a lot of resources. That's critical. And obviously, I think in Milwaukee, just to use that as an example, we hit our turnout targets, fell a little bit short in Philly and Detroit. So that's not good. That's part of the equation. You've got to couple that with dominating in the middle, not just winning it a little. We have to dominate the moderate vote. And I think as we look ahead to 26 and 28, particularly where you have seen drift amongst non-college voters generally, particularly those of color specifically, we obviously have to get some of that back. We can't afford any more erosion there. The math just doesn't fucking work.
The math just doesn't fucking work. All right, Dan, what do you think of that?
I mean, here's the problem. Josh Shapiro won huge. John Fetterman won. Like the idea that if I listen to that, I think it's like Florida, Missouri, or Texas for Democrats, right? It's a Republican 53-47, like, you know, no matter how good of a candidate we run, we're just always going to come up like, you know, just short. Like, yes, like, no, duh, you got to win the middle. Like, that is not rocket science. I mean, look, he's way smarter than I am. He's run presidential campaigns. I have not, so I want to be respectful here. But that to me absolves, it makes it sound like we were pushing a boulder so far up a hill it was almost impossible. And I don't believe that.
That's so
Son.
I mean, it's head in the sand. I mean, the idea, we spent an entire campaign hearing about how all these states were winnable and this wasn't an issue and they were going to take Georgia and Arizona. And now it's, oh, Pennsylvania's so hard. I mean, I hate to say this, Pluff is better than that. That's just, again, this gets back to the Politico Dan Balls Washington Post story. Look in the mirror, guys. If you guys want to talk about how difficult it is to win Pennsylvania, to Dan's point, the evidence just doesn't hold up. Shapiro crushed it. Fetterman crushed it. He ran against Oz, who had a ton of money. I mean, like, this is not, then what's your issue in Wisconsin? What's your issue in Michigan? It just, you called it a blue wall. And now you're saying that, like, wow, these things are really, really tough. It just doesn't add up. And they look stupid saying these things because for the whole campaign, we heard about North Carolina and Arizona and, and then we've got the blue wall as our backup. And now it's, woe is me. Pennsylvania was always going to be so much trouble. And the math is just, I mean, come on. I said this earlier today. Democrats won some big time Midwestern House races, in addition to big time Senate races. So why was it only a problem for her and not for other parts of the party? And I'm not talking House races in Detroit. I'm talking House races in those swing districts of the state of Michigan. I just, to Sean's point, like that is just, and all the problems that he's pointing out were being pointed out back in January when it came to Biden, and nobody did anything but drop, tens of millions of dollars on TV ads. Like nobody wanted to touch a lot of these problems because Democrats refused to believe they were really problems. And that is just,
so let's drill down another level here. Again, stipulating we all have respect for David Pluff.
yes.
Why would he do an interview like that? What's in it for him?
Oh, reputational,
But his reputation is being shredded by the two of you. So like, why go out and do an interview if that's what you're going to say?
Because the Pod Save America crowd's not going to push back very hard. You know who their audience is, which is progressives.
Okay, but what do you get? What do you get out of if you convince their audience that narrative is true? What do you get out of that? Avoid blame for Kamala Harris?
So look, you're asking the question you're asking is really good because there are days in which, and it
happens. Occasionally I ask a good question.
Occasionally it happens. It's, but here's the thing, every once in a while, and I wouldn't say guilty of this, but there are friends of yours that ask you to go do an interview, but hey, it would be super helpful of us, I assume that he's very close with Favreau and those guys, right? And so,
he is.
Right. So they say, dude, come on, just come on with us. It would be huge for us. So you're doing them.
That's the way we booked you for the morning meeting.
Yeah, I know. But the point is that when you ask, because normally, why would you do an interview like that? Well, part of it is probably out of friendship. And so you're going, okay, I'll do it. But then I got to be careful that I don't go too far that I bash her. That's why you do that interview, not because you're trying to get something off your chest or because you're trying to really provide insightful analytics to this whole thing. That's not the place you do it. But it's a base where they don't want to hear crap. They don't want to hear that she was wrong. They, that's they hate Donald Trump.
Yeah. All right, Michael, welcome in. Tell folks where you are.
And by the
what's
way,
on your-
that's the
yeah.
same crowd that said to Democrats the hope and vibes was going to carry the wave. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
until after Labor Day that there seemed to be some acknowledgement we needed more.
Yeah.
I mean,
Michael,
Yeah,
sorry,
I'm here.
Michael, go ahead, Michael. What's on your hat? It's hard to see.
Oh, it's just some Mets beanie.
Okay, Metropolitans.
And I was at the Comedy Cellar, so I saw you guys before. It's Mike Impression. So just want to make a quick point with the other question as far as January 6th. So they changed the electoral count vote. So now it's 1/5 as far as the House of Representatives and 1/5 as far as the senators. So there might be some objections with Congress people, but it's going to be stopped by Kamala because they won't have the number, of politicians.
Yeah. They'll be. I don't know that anybody's going to object to it. This first election in a while, where I think nobody will object. Michael, thank you for that. Favorite Thanksgiving food?
Favorite Thanksgiving food? I would have to say turkey. But as far as my favorite turkey, that would have to be Eric Adams.
Thank you, sir. Happy holidays to you. But I'm bummed.
well played.
Favorite turkey, Eric Adams. Like everything about that. All right. Sandra, welcome in. Thanks for coming back. Happy holidays to you.
You get me?
We got you. Not everybody knows where you live. We do, but tell everybody.
Pennsylvania.
Yes,
I
you're the queen
was-
maker, king maker.
Yes, yes. And I've been watching on YouTube, so I decided to come on. Two things. I want to make a statement. Happy
Yes, ma'am.
Thanksgiving. Thank
Thank
you
you.
that I am able to accept Donald Trump's win and still not lose my mind. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you for that.
That's the whole goal of this show, I believe. And my question for you, Mark, is if you're on that call, that 15-minute call that her big time donors are they going to say don't run again? Because
I
that's
I don't think she'll take questions. I think she'll just thank them, and I'm not sure what she'll say. She'll
oh
probably
my God.
probably rail against Trump nominees, maybe.
Yeah.
The donors actually, and this is again a little dog that isn't barking. I'm surprised there haven't been stories in like the New York Times and even the Daily Beast of donors, both anonymously and on the record, trashing her and saying they burned through $2 billion of our money. You've seen
Yeah.
almost none of that,
No.
and I don't know if
no.
that's loyalty or what, but just as when Biden got out of the race,
Mhm.
you did start to hear some donors, including Clooney, say,
Right.
I was around him, he had lost his mind. I think you're going to start to hear, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, but I think you will start to hear from some donors who met with her during the convention and forward stories about their concern that she wasn't up for winning the election based on their interactions with her. But even in those settings, as I understand it, things were pretty tightly controlled, even like when she was at somebody's house. So she wasn't that exposed, but for them, that was another dog that didn't bark, which is like, if she can't even talk to us, her donors in an off the record setting, how is she going to be up to doing this? So there'll be some of it, but I predict there'll be no questions on the call today. We all do. Particularly since it's only 15 minutes. Yeah, go ahead, Sandra. Go ahead.
It reminds me of, Gore and Four, when everybody was yelling, Gore and Four, Gore and Four, after he didn't make it. And then, he went away. And that's my prediction, is that she will go away.
I think so too, but we'll see. Sean.
So this is Dan's world more than mine. So I'm now going to play the role of the questioner here. But if I were a major donor, I mean, look, especially early on in a campaign, getting early donor, big donor money is critical. It's a lifeblood. I mean, it gives you the ability to hire staff, to travel, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
She may still have that constituency with her, despite some of the criticisms that we have. Like, they still may like her, want to donate to her, whatever. If I were doing this call today and I were the finance director, I'd be very concerned that you piss these guys off and they get off. They go, are you kidding me? She get on, gave a glib comment. Tim Waltz says something and then they wish us happy Thanksgiving and get off the call. I'd be pissed. And my question to Dan is like, is it worth is her staff saying to her, hey, you may do more damage than good on a call like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you want to do is treat these donors with respect, right? There's the care and feeding of they want to felt heard. They want to felt like they have information that they don't get in the New York Times, right? It's just kind of the basic of politics. And I think that, you know, one, I don't think the donors will say anything negative to her. You tend to be respectful of the office holder. Sometimes there's one or two who like just can't help themselves, but I think Mark's right. They won't take questions. But if you're thinking of running for president, what you tend to do then is you will fly and meet these people or bring them in one by one. George W. Bush had the front porch listening sessions in 1997, 1998. You know, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, you would do these retreats where you would bring people in, you would spend. If she just gets on a call and I'll reach out to you in February, huge mistake, because I think the sharks are circling. And a lot of donors don't have a great impression of her. And they didn't, and by the way, in 2019, you heard the same stories that when you met with her privately, she didn't really say anything to you, right? It was like she was talking to a wall. It could have been anybody, you know, that you put in front of her. She would never, it was very disciplined, I guess is how she would put it. Yeah. But winning candidates are warm, they're engaging, they look you in the eye, they hear what you say. And it's like, oh man, I want to know more about that widget you make or the market that you work in. You know, you just make them feel heard.
Dan, what would you advise them? If you were advising, she called you and said, I saw you in the morning meeting. What should I say? What would you advise her to say?
I think if I only had 15 minutes, I would say that I am going to be holding, you know, a weekend retreat with you. I mean, look, assuming she wants to run again for some,
or at least keep the option open.
Yeah, or wants to preserve it. I would say, look, I took some time off. I had to decompress. I'm as, you know, disappointed and angry and pissed off as you probably are. As I re-enter the fight here and I want to be a voice in our party, I am going to be reaching out to all of you, you know, individually or in groups. And we're going to be, I want to hear from you what went wrong and what we can do. And I want to work with you for the party. That is what I would say so that people feel like, all right, more to come. But she gets it.
And maybe announce the hiring of Boris Epshteyn as her new chief legal and political advisor. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sandra, go ahead. What would you want to say?
I just want to say that what was most effective about two-way was when I listened to, it was a woman from South Carolina. You had to leave early, I think, Mark, and she was thinking about who she was going to vote for. She ended up, you know, voting for Trump, and she said, why? And I thought, gee, you know, I kind of think the same way she does. You know, she was down the middle. She wasn't, you know, a MAGA. She wasn't.
Yeah.
And that to me was very helpful.
Yeah. Look, one of the things we're proudest of, and if the credit doesn't go to us, it goes to the people of the community like you, is I don't think there's any doubt that if you watched two-way for the last 2 months of the election, you had a better sense of where things were headed than consuming media. And it's because of people like that. And people like you. Thank you for joining and happy holidays. What's your favorite Thanksgiving food?
Mashed potatoes. Nobody said it.
Yeah, that's a good choice. No one said apple pie either, which is actually the correct answer. Have a great holiday. Thank you for being part of this. Very grateful to you.
How about the answer is all of the above, if you love America, right?
That's true. If you love America. Here's someone who loves America, but in his own bizarro way, Michael Graham of the Granite State. Michael, welcome in. Thank you for joining.
So wrong about so many things on food. First of all, turkey sucks. Everyone knows turkey sucks. That's why when you go to the hospital, they give you turkey. You want chicken.
I've muted Michael. Michael, get that out of your system.
Wow.
All right, we're bringing Michael back. It's the presumption of grace, but stop trashing turkey. It's un-American. Go ahead. Unmute again, but just don't trash turkey. Go ahead.
Sweet potato praline casserole, amazing. Paul Prudhomme, wonderful. So my report is actually from Vegas. I was there this weekend for some work stuff, and I was in a gift shop, and I tweeted out the photo of all the Kamala Harris stuff at 75% off. Ha ha ha, you know. But what jumped out at me as a total student government nerd was I'm looking at her stuff, which no one was looking at. And it was, by the way, Formula One week. So it's a bunch of high-end, you know, smart, wealthy people. They were snatching up the Trump stuff, and it wasn't MAGA stuff. It looked so cool. And I looked around. They went, holy crap, how did Trump and MAGA and people that are looked down upon become the cool ones? And I cannot express to you how profound this is in politics, because we live in the era of Starbucks voting. People don't vote based on their own interests, like what's wrong with Kansas, whatever. It's, I'm the kind of candidate, a person who goes Starbucks. And if you're a Starbucks voter and you want to be with the cool kids, I'm looking at these T-shirts, these hats and stuff, and all the Europeans are looking at them, and they hate Trump, and they're buying Trump stuff because it's so cool. And if that lingers, and Democrats can't solve that, Dan, I'm sorry. I'm looking for some help at Inside Sources, man. Maybe I can give you a gig.
Michael, did you go to any of the pop-up Trump stores?
No, I didn't go to pop-up.
There's one in Rhode Island.
I wish I had. I never got to. If I were still making the circus, I would have gone to one, because Trump loved them, and Trump felt about the Trump pop-up stores the way you're talking about the Trump merch in Vegas, which is like, it's cool. It's like people want to own it. They want a MAGA hat, and Harris just didn't have that same thing, even though demographically and in terms of like her relationship pop culture, she should have, but she didn't.
And the weapon that Democrats using, and then this is the report from New Hampshire, is right across the border, Seth Moulton is talking about transgender and guys and girls sports the way that a lot of normal people do. And Democrats are trying to use social pressure. They're waving their Starbucks cups and saying, you're not one of the good people, the cool people, the elite people. You can't have that opinion. And the people with that opinion are now on team cool, and it's not working. And I'm just watching. I'm going to be fascinated if in purple leaning states, in New Hampshire, every Democrat in the legislature voted to keep guys and girls sports. Every one of them voted in favor of sanctuary cities. That was their strategy. Stick together. Trump will lose so bad. We'll all win by just hating Trump. Now they're going to have to vote on those issues in the coming session, and it's going to happen in states across the country. They're not going to have the social pressure tool to have people go, inside, I know it's crazy to let these biological males do this. I know it's crazy to have sanctuary cities, but I'm not allowed to say it. I think the voters are going to be saying, I am allowed to say it. And in fact, all the cool guys with the cool stuff are saying it. And that's
Michael, one quick point. If you're in New England and you're drinking a Starbucks, you're not the cool guy.
Look, I don't touch the stuff. My wife.
I'm just saying, like, that's, better than anyone that there's Dunkin' Donuts is king.
And what's so fascinating about that is, I would argue that you could divide American politics into Starbucks versus Dunkin'. You go to Starbucks, who is it? It's obnoxious, self-important people who work down right on at the seacoast in Boston. What are the guys who wear boots that aren't quite tied, who have 3 jackets on because they work outside? They all got a huge Dunkin' and a couple of sandwiches. Who has the ugly, garish art? It's Dunkin' Donuts. Remember the goofy ads they were doing with Matt and Matt, what's his name? And
Matt Damon.
Yeah, Matt Damon. And yet here you are in New England, where the voting doesn't work that way. That's why, where did you see the shifts? Where were the biggest shifts, Dan, by percentage? They were in Starbucks country, because secretly everyone knows Starbucks costs way too much and it sucks. Dunkin' costs far less and it's better.
Yes.
And now they're allowed to say it.
Preach, brother.
Amen.
Michael, what's New Hampshire?
I would say, though, to your point, Democrats had a moment this summer of like the hot breath summer, the camo hats, like they had a moment. I mean, look, you could argue it was more in Blue America, obviously, than Red America, the way now Blue America is embracing the Trump cultural phenomenon. And like, look, when you win, you're hot. Like people want to be with the winner. I think there's a little bit of like, this is kind of a great thing, but let's see, right? An apex is usually after you get elected and before you have to start governing. So let's see if in August, this is still the case.
And a quick tie back to what Halperin was saying earlier about the media and how talk radio rose and where the lefties, whatever, et cetera. One of the things that's happening is that because people on the left won't say things honestly, they're creating this space for people. I spent 50 years in talk radio. I wasn't in talk radio because I was a right winger. I was in talk radio because we were allowed to talk about the stuff that the New York Times and NPR weren't going to talk about. And if Democrats lose the ability to close those gates, and suddenly the average American's feelings are represented by just one party, even in blue spaces, how do you fight again? How do you get that moment back where you were the cool guys? All the cool people are saying what everyone knew all along. Democrats are proposing crazy crap. It's not crazy because it's Democrat. It's crazy because it's crazy.
Well, Trump said this on the trail at one point. He said, it's not Republican, it's common sense. And he had a point, and because I think the left went so crazy that so much of what we were preaching actually just made sense to people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I just
Michael?
think part of the problem is the Democrats haven't wanted to answer questions.
Right. No.
To outside of their say, like I totally agree with you. Meghan McCain said something earlier this week on social media about this. Like that, part of the problem for Harris is she just didn't want to say.
Right.
And so you're right. You can't go give an interview if you don't want to talk.
And I'm going to put it on the record. Watch for the next 2 years the problem Democrats have with abortion, because we spent time in Pennsylvania and New Hampshire watching people trying to defend the Democrats' establishment position now, which is no limits at all. And they have the same problem that Republicans had with the transgender issue, where they were going out and telling people what Harris really said. And people said, oh, that can't be true. That's too crazy. When Democrats are forced in these upcoming debates to actually say, yeah, no limits, they're going to start paying prices and you're going to start seeing movement. That's my prediction.
All right, Michael, we're very, very pleased to have you be part of Two-Way. You've been a big supporter from the start, and we're glad to have you here, and happy holidays to you.
Thank you so much.
All right, happy holidays to everybody. Again, no programs here for the next couple days. We'll see you on Monday. I'll be back for my final show pre-Thanksgiving tonight at 6. We'll have full coverage of Kamala Harris's 2 very truncated conference calls with her donors and with the grassroots, maybe even some secret audio. So join me at 6. And we're very thankful for all of you. You've helped us build Two-Way. Does not exist without you. People often say that about their audience in media, but in this case, it's really true because you're an integral part of the program.
Mark,
Yes,
one
sir.
point, when you're sitting around having those Thanksgiving discussions and dinners and whatever, I think that's the time, just if you can, tell them about the morning meeting. Tell them that this is a place that they should go look at. I'm being serious. I think so many people I know are dreading those conversations, and tell them that there's an outlet for them and they should tune in every morning at 9 Eastern.
Yeah. Dan.
I'm thankful for the show and thankful for the community. And I hope everyone has a great holiday.
Happy holidays, everybody. I'll see you at 6, and then we'll see you on Monday, 9 a.m.
Take care.